welcome to the show. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in beautiful Fresno, California. Fresno, the heart of the Central Valley, the heart of the state of California. A lot of heart going on here, and I'm glad you're with me today. It's a great day. Been a tough week, but it's a great day. And each day was great, even though life came at us at the speed of life. But as a result of all sorts of stuff happening, which I don't really need to address at this point in time, the idea of experiencing and celebrating happiness in our life, in our day-to-day life, regardless of what happens. You know, one of the things that Ernest Holmes taught and talked about was our ability in our life expression to experience life abundantly, in harmony with principle, with what he called God, in beauty, in peace, and in that experience of divine love is this thing that we call happiness. Man, that's a pretty powerful concept, and that's the promise, if you will, that Ernest Holmes brought to the world, at least from my perspective, and I hope from yours too. But as we experience life, caught up in today's world with all the stuff going on, and you know, there really is a lot of stuff going on out there if you bother to take a peek out into the world. I mean, generally I don't do it. This week I took a little peek, and then I think I'm going to close the door again. It's much nicer inside, so to speak, no pun intended. Happiness is that elusive thing that so many in their lives seek. And yet, very few people really discover the root of true happiness. They seek fulfillment outside themselves. For some people, that's a life journey that obsesses them. It never ends. It leads oftentimes to a lot of success in life, but there's a lot of successful people that aren't really happy. And so as this week has unfolded for me, and people that I've had close contact with, taking a look at how we experience happiness individually through the promise of the gift of life, that the divine principle, that life that God gave us. It's kind of where my mind is today. And so, you know, New Thought Talk is what we talk about. It's things that are basically on my mind, in alignment with New Thought, religious science, science of mind and spirit. How are you experiencing happiness in your life today? You know, I've often said, and just as I opened the program this morning, it's a great day. Start your day with that. You know, that first 20 minutes in the morning when we get up, when the mind still hasn't really gelled into the day, you know, that's a critical time for influencing our subjective mind. And that's where the power lies within us. That's our real connectedness with Source. That's where the divine creative principle lives within us. And that's where a lot of us live at a high level, even though we're not aware of it, of thoughts and beliefs that keep us from experiencing this thing called happiness. And yet, you have everything within you to experience happiness all the time. But if you don't believe it, if it's a concept that you're not familiar with, what I'm saying sounds maybe strange, possibly impossible, right? I mean, happiness. And if we were to sit down together, you'd say, but Reverend Steve, look at what I got going on in my life. And you've got your list, and I realize that. We all have our list. And oftentimes our list is tied to our story, and I've talked about our story. You know, our story, it's the journey that we made to this point. But our story is not the controlling factor in our life, but many of us let it be. You know, we do so much to protect our story because somehow we self-identify with that story. And self-identification is a big thing in the world today. So let's take a look at our story. Whatever it is. You know, we're We are all created equally. That's a theme that I have shared many times. We're not all born equally or in equality. And to understand how that plays out, all you have to do is look across the world and you see so much diversity, and not necessarily in a good way. If we allow our physical story to define the who and what we are, you'll get a lot of what we see in the world. But if you understand that by the mere fact that we are all created equally, the Creator, the divine principle, that which we call God, universal intelligence, however you want to relate to that, the Creator gave us everything that we need to be exceptional in this life, to be great. There is greatness in each and every one of us because we are God expressing as us. But if you don't understand that, my friends, if you've never really gotten to the point of making that connectedness, it sounds nice for the other guy. We work at it, and then we don't, because it's not us, but it is you. You see, if there is truly only one, if we're all expressions of the one, there is no separateness. You cannot separate yourself from God. You cannot separate yourself from principle. You cannot separate yourself from your source. You cannot separate yourself from the gift of happiness that was given to you, and yet so many of us do. We find things to be unhappy about, to complain about. You know, the Complaint-Free World bracelet that came out, it's been quite a while ago. They're still in business, and I can't, sorry right now, I can't give you the information to how to connect with them. They're out of Denver. You can connect with them. Go to the internet, Google Complaint-Free World. You'll get a bracelet. Doesn't cost that much. They've got a book. I'd suggest reading it. It's not the only thing to do, but it's a great way to start if you've not started in any other place. You'd be surprised when you begin to create a conscious awareness of how much we complain. Big complaints, little complaints. But you know, every single complaint that we have, that we make during the day, is an expression of something greater and deeper that we hold within ourselves. It's judgment, it's fear, it's anger. It's all the things that are antithetical to this thing called happiness and to the expression of love of God within us. And yet, we don't think about it. Oftentimes, we consider ourselves spiritual, good people, whether we're New Thought people, religious science people, whether we go to a Christian church or a temple or a synagogue. You know, we consider ourselves good people. And in truth, we all are good people. We all are God's people. But we don't all create greater good in life. And the idea, the concept of creating greater good in our life, as individual as that is, it's universal in its effect. It goes so far beyond our mere beingness, and yet we have little or no clue or understanding how that takes place. Oftentimes, many of us don't believe it, but it does. It happens. You know, we've talked about in recent shows this thing called race consciousness or universal collective unconsciousness. It's a concept of a general level of consciousness that we're all subject to on some level, that has an influence in our lives, that is a repository for humanity, so to speak, and all that's happened. And we can pull from that good, we can pull from that things that we call not good. We will pull from it because nobody is free from it, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It's part of consciousness. Coming to New Thought, coming to religious science, science of mind and spirit, a lot of people get really excited about the concept of creating a better life, or maybe experiencing healing from a physical condition or a psychological condition, or experiencing abundance or relationships, or so many things that they see as the promise of New Thought, religious science. And it's true. We can do and experience all those things. We can bring those things into our life. If we get focused on the law of attraction, I think we get lost. We go down a path that's not part of the greater stream of the good that's available to us. And sometimes people go there, get there, and they get lost. And sometimes in their lostness, they cannot find their way back to a more fundamental understanding of a basic truth. There's a law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect has a corollary we call law of attraction, but it's not the only thing. Law of cause and effect is quite diverse. It's like talking about the laws of thermodynamics or laws of energy. We can talk about general terms or we can talk about specific terms. And sometimes when we get specifics, there's a variant from the general. And that happens when we deal with things like the law of attraction. But the law of cause and effect says for every effect there's a cause. The idea of a principle of oneness is that God is the ultimate cause behind all effects. People say, well, if God's the principle behind all effects, and we see things in the world that don't look so good, is God the cause of that also? God's impersonal. God brings to us what we first bring into our own mind. And God knows us individually as we know ourselves, and works for us and works through us at the level we know ourselves, at the level of our belief. And I say all that to bring it back around to this idea of happiness. Life comes at us at the speed of life, but how we experience that's so powerful in understanding. How we experience life is solely and totally our individual expression in this life, held in the beliefs that we hold, including the ones that we don't know that we hold, that create for us our understanding of each experience. When we begin to have an understanding and a belief that we can find good and happiness even in sad situations, we can experience the sadness, we can experience the depth of grief and loss. But when you do so, and you do it from a place of a loving warmth, there's something there. Now, you don't have to call it happiness. I choose to. But there's something there. We can just call it God if you want. But it's there in each and every one of us. We're going to take our first commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up this idea of happiness and how we express it in our life and how we get to it. I hope to see you when we come back.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
So we talk about happiness. Well, actually, welcome back. This is New Thought Talk with Reverend Steve Walling. I'm just ready to go right out of the gate. I'm with the Spiritual Awareness Center located in wonderful Fresno, California. It's a great place to be. Happiness. How can we put ourselves in a state of consciousness where happiness really is one of the fundamental foundations of all that we experience in life? Whether what life brings to us is something that we may call sad or something that may be incredibly happy. If we look to the outside, if we look to the things that our five senses tell us is the real world, there's always going to be lack. There's always going to be some kind of tragedy. There's always going to be chaos. But if we go to that place, Jesus said, into that secret place, go into the closet, secret place of the Most High, whatever you want to call it. But when we go to that place within ourselves, in the center of our beings, the center of our consciousness, the divine principle as us, that spark within us, sits there. It's there, it's it's a harmony, it's a peace, and it's indescribable in so many ways. It's there in each and every one of us. Most of us have not experienced it. Ernest Holmes said it was necessary that we have spiritual experience. And the reason why it's necessary for us to have spiritual experience is so that we can understand the depth of the truth that exists within each and every one of us. It's incredibly powerful. Jesus said that if you've got the blind leading the blind, you fall off a curb. If you intellectualize, if you verbalize, but you don't embody through the experience, it sounds nice, it sounds happy, but you're never going to get to that place of peace and harmony within yourself. Most people, they really don't want to work for their gifts. They want them in life. We live in an environment that, hey, go to Amazon.com, go down to your local Walmart, whatever it is. It's pretty much there. But what's not there is your connectedness with Source. What's not there is your connectedness with the harmony and the peace that exists within you. What's not there is the chaos that lives outside of you. Our journey to that place is very specific and individual. But it's a journey that as we begin our spiritual practices, it's a journey that each of us has to make. And that's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, as we do that, not only does our life change, but as I said before, we change the world around us. But there's certain things that we have to bring ourselves into alignment with as we make that journey. One of the things that filter within us that tells us what the world is on a materialistic level, we often call it the ego, although ego can be used to describe other aspects of us. But that within us, which looks at the world from a comparative level, where it compares us against whatever, we often call that judgment. One of the great teachings that comes out of the New Testament is, judge not, lest ye be judged. By what measure you judge, so shall you be judged. Ernest Holmes utilized that a lot in his teaching. And this little book is titled The Hidden Power of the Bible by Ernest Holmes. He has here, judge not, lest ye be judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you met, it shall be measured against you. He says this statement could come only from one who had a deep insight into the universal law of cause and effect, which balances everything and sees that, in the long run, everything receives its just due, his just due. So as we begin to move forward on our spiritual journey to create, we're not seeking happiness. The happiness is already there. We're working to create our relationship with the happiness that exists within us. On our journey, one of the first steps we have to take, and it can be tough for a lot of us, is to give up our judgment. Ooh, man. Again, all you have to do is look out in the world. There's a lot that we judge, and a lot of judgment going on in the world, and a lot of chaos. And I'm not saying that there's not things that need to be addressed in the world, and goodness that needs to be expressed, and harmony that needs to be brought into this chaos. I'm not saying that we put that aside or we ignore it. But there's many different ways to approach situations. We can approach them as a warrior going to war, and we're going to find battle. We can approach it as a, the word slips my mind, but someone's going to change things, basically. And we can do so, again, with that aggressive attitude. Jesus also taught that those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. And Holmes has some great teachings around that particular quote. But we can look to someone like Gandhi, who changed the map of the world. And he didn't do it with anger. He didn't do it with warfare. He did it by being the change he wanted to see in the world. There's a story that I heard many years ago about a woman who brought her child, and it took a week of traveling to get to Gandhi. And she finally got to him, and she brought her child before the great man, and she said, "I want you to tell him not to eat sugar." Gandhi looked at her and he said, "Bring your son back in a month." And she was a little perplexed, and it was a hard journey, but she did it anyway. And 1 month later, she comes back. She brings her son before Gandhi, and he says, "Don't eat sugar." The mother got rather agitated at that point because of the difficulty of the travel, the time involved, and she questioned him on it. And the great man said, "When you brought him here a month ago, and you asked me to tell him not to eat sugar, I ate sugar." And the understanding that we take away from that is when we seek to create change, if we're not the change that we want to create, we're creating it on a false foundation. So we can look at judgment, and we can throw in fear and anger and a lot of other things. Fear can be a tough one because the brain's hardwired for fear, but we know today that the tools that Ernest Holmes pioneered and the early New Thought pioneers pioneered about changing our beliefs also help to rewire our brain. Through this thing called neuroplasticity, we can functionally wire around the fear mechanism through which everything is initially filtered. Evolutionarily, it was a great idea because, you didn't know when you saw something out of the corner of your vision, and it was kind of maybe black and orange stripes or something, whether that was, something on one of the neighbors down at the cave down the way, or if that was a tiger. That which comes through the fear mechanism creates an instantaneous response within the body that no thought is involved with, and you take off running, or you freeze, or you fight. Saved people. Powerful tool. Great, 50,000 years ago. Doesn't work so well today. But it's still there. And we've talked about how we can modify our brain through some very simple steps done daily. And I'm going to get back to this done daily part because this is where it becomes significant. In our search to happiness, or in recognizing the happiness that's within us. It's not a Sunday thing. It's not a Sunday, Wednesday thing. It's not when we go to our classes. It's not when we sit and read our books. It's a constant thing. Because that which we're seeking to change within us is also there constantly. It's also expressing through us constantly. Maybe not at a conscious level, but it's there and it expresses. And it's creative. If we're going to create a new environment within our beingness, we have to work at creating the environment, not just saying we want change. It's nice to say you want change. It's different when you begin the journey to create change. You create the change not to discover something new, not to bring something new into your life, but to uncover what's already there. I don't know if that was the divine principle's intention, but the journey itself allows God, allows life to express through us in so many ways, and it really becomes an adventure. It is a spiritual adventure. Whether you choose to sit on a mountaintop, or whether you choose to work in a high-rise building in one of the big cities on the coast, San Francisco or New York. It's an adventure, and it's an adventure that is open and available to each and every one of us. And the invitation is there, not out there. It's not going to come in the mail. It's not from the post office. The invitation is there within us, and it awaits us becoming aware that it's there. Oftentimes, we get to that point because we're sad, we're unhappy. And there's a pharmaceutical industry and there's a healthcare industry that has made fortunes. There's coaching industries that have made fortunes for people, teaching us how to be happy. There's some great happiness research being done. I think the guy at Harvard, I think his name's Daniel Gilbert, and I've seen some of his talks on TED Talk. He's got some books out. I find it interesting when he talks about happiness that is a result of some event that, you know, puts a smile on our face and makes us feel good. He believes that to be like genuine happiness. But the happiness that we create within ourselves, he refers to as like a synthetic happiness, because we have to synthesize it. And maybe technically that's true, but in reality, that's where true happiness resides. And once we learn that we can do this, that we can be the creators of that, not in that slapstick, always belly laugh type experience, but in that inner contentment. And it comes with the realization of so many other spiritual concepts that, you know, we could probably, and maybe we will, do other shows on it. But when you get there, it's like, you know you're there. And it's amazing. But you got to give up the judgment and the hate and so on and so forth. You got to take the time and quiet the mind. Boy, that mind has got a lot of stuff going on. There's the stuff that's going on that we're thinking about, and the stuff that's going on that we're not thinking about consciously, but still there. There's the beliefs that we hold, and whether you want to call it the shadow or the subjective mind beliefs that we hold that we're not aware of, like Christian Larson did, doesn't make any difference. There's that within us, which is a universality of itself, and yet it is so powerful in its influence on how we consciously experience life. But our consciousness, you know, it's amazing. It's like the steering mechanism on one of these huge ships. You know, these great container ships, they're immense. You know, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of feet long. They carry, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds of stuff. They traverse the entire ocean. The steering mechanism, some of them have a wheel, but some of them have just a little joystick. They both work the same way. It takes little or no effort. An impulse is sent to some electronic stuff that moves some stuff, that moves some stuff, that moves the rudder. But the person that does the steering doesn't have to work hard, doesn't have to move that thing. There are forces that move that thing for them. It's the same thing for us. We are the captains of our ship, the captains of our fate, the captains of our soul, the captains of our experience. We are the masters. And there's something that responds within us. And it's powerful, more powerful than anything that moves one of these huge ships. And it's available to each and every one of us. And Jesus said it's done unto us as we believe. That's what he's talking about. What is being done unto us is not being done to us from outside forces or sources, although we see that in our life and we want to blame outside sources and forces. But what's done unto us is done unto us at the level of our belief. I'm running a little over, so we're going to take our next break, and we'll pick this up when we come back. See ya.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Voir dire, An Oath to Tell and Seek the Truth by Santiago Camarena, depicts the vicious cycle of drugs, crime, and incarceration. It argues that the media, politics, and our laws systematically contribute to this cycle. Get your copy of Voir dire at VoirDireStory.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in beautiful Fresno, California. So we're talking about happiness. And as I looked over the stuff during the break, I think we'll probably do this over a period of a couple of shows. I'm just not going to try to cram it all in today. And if you watch it live, fine. But if not, you can see us we're on the New Thought channel now, by the way. You can see us there, or you can see us on Facebook because we stream live, or you can go to YouTube. I think it's, New Thought Talk or Steve Walling on YouTube. You'll find it there. Our archive. A lot of stuff there. Excuse me. Coffee's good. Anyway, as we've grown up, whether we're a young adult or whether we're more seasoned citizen, society, the outside world, has defined for us what life is about. And for most people, as they've made that spiritual connection in their life, more commonly, because it is more common, that connectedness is through what we will consider to be older established spiritual philosophies. Not that that's bad or wrong. They can be very meaningful. It can be very empowering as you live your life experience, and I'm not casting dispersions on them at all. But there are different perspectives. And from the perspective of someone that sees and believes in the oneness of all, the unity, that there's not us and God, there's just God expressing as us. And understanding that in that expression within us, God knows us at the level that we know ourselves. And sometimes people say, well, what do you mean? God knows everything, should know all of us more than what we know about ourselves. And truth be told, as we are God expressing as us, what we know about ourselves is the limitation of what can be known. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of potential there, because there is. The greatness is there. The adventure is there. The life experience is there. But if we don't know it for ourselves, it's not part of our life experience. I heard someone say that life is God's gift to us. How we live life is our gift that we give to God. And truthfully, I don't think that's too far off the mark. I think that's a pretty good way of looking at things. We are given this life, and we're given the basic tools, everything we need, not to just survive at a minimal level, not to just be average, but we're given the tools to grow so far beyond what we can even begin to understand about ourselves that we don't experience it because we can't begin to understand it about ourselves. Our journey is to, like an onion, peel the levels of our understanding to get to the core, the truth of who we are. Created in the likeness and the image of the divine principle, the law of cause and effect that responds to consciousness, being conscious beings, being able to wrap all this up into our individual experience and then limiting it by what we learned growing up, what reality has told us. Going to our jobs, dealing with our families, fighting the good fight, and always feeling like there's something more. Then we look out in the world and we see all the chaos out there. We get stirred up inside emotionally. We pick a side to be an advocate for. We advocate for it at various levels. We bring all that into the world, and we perpetuate the what is. We perpetuate the chaos. We perpetuate the hate, the sadness. We perpetuate that which we define as evil. It's not God created, that's man. That's man all the way. In our desire to rule over others, take from others, sometimes it's damaged consciousness, sometimes it's just, I don't even know. But I know that it comes from men. But I also know that there's something greater and more powerful. One of the words that we use to speak of the divine principle is love, and I believe absolutely that totally defines that which is indefinable. Because we can't even begin to define what love is. We really can't. We understand love at certain levels, but we can't understand love at the level of the creator of all that is, the breather of life, the gift giver. There is no judgment there. We often say that God is impersonal, but you have to understand that when we say God is impersonal, we're saying God has no judgment. There are people that believe that God is very judgmental, that God keeps a list, and you know that whole story. But if you understand God is the creative principle of all that is, there can't be God and something else, and there can't be something that God's going to hold a list for in order to have something to hold a list against its own creation. So we look at that and we say, okay, that's somebody's belief and we can respect that. But we believe in a greater concept of God. When I say a greater concept, I'm not speaking judgmentally, I'm speaking of in bigness. Because this God has no limitation. Judgment forms a level of limitation. Greater is in more than. Greater is in immanent and transcendent. Interesting words, immanent and transcendent. You look them up in the dictionary, and you'll find one is the kind of the opposite of the other. How can God be immanent and transcendent at the same time? If God's infinite, it can be. It's a great concept to wrap your mind around. On your journey to discovering within yourself that core that's there. There are people that have spent their life in meditation, in going within. They've told us stories. There are, we call them masters, people that have mastered their lives. They've shared their stories. There's teachers like the Buddha. There's teachers like Jesus. There's teachers like, history is full of teachers. But teachers can't do anything for us other than give us the information. Our experience is ours. But if you've lived a life, if you're new to New Thought, or if you've been in New Thought for a while, and you're not experiencing life like you'd like, it's not a shame on you, and some people get into that consciousness. Well, you are responsible for all in your life. And that's a nice way of judging somebody and making us feel more secure as New Thoughters or whatever. But it's not true. Responsibility may be, but fault is not. We're responsible for every breath that we take. And if we stop breathing, we stop. We're not responsible. We're not at fault. It just is what is. We're responsible for creating the environment that we live in. But if we grew up with a limiting belief in a limited environment, you might be able to say that we're responsible, but a more valid way of saying is that we have been limited by our, and I hate to use lack of understanding. I don't like the word ignorance, but we're limited by what we don't know about what can be known. Now, when we begin to learn that there's something to be known, then we have choice. Choice, powerful thing, choice. But if you don't know you have a choice, it can be right there in front of you, and you still don't have it. But we all have choice. So let's, for the purpose of this conversation, we get to a point of realization that, our life surroundings not what we want to deal with. We're not going to worry about what is for right here. What we're going to do is realize that right here is our starting point. No matter what our starting point is, if you're up to your eyeballs in mud or something even more toxic, you're not going to start on the beach somewhere in consciousness. You start right in the mud, which isn't a bad thing, because for every improvement that you begin to experience as you begin to make other choices in your life, the comparison's pretty radical sometimes, almost miraculous even. Cause and effect. Ultimate cause is divine principle, that which we call God. Effect, somewhere in between, is this thing called law. We'll get into that also at some point. Cause and effect, God and God. And we are so perfectly located in that whole concept that everything that is necessary for us to experience life at an incredible level awaits our awareness. Happiness doesn't come from the outside. Happiness comes from within. And I haven't really got into it yet. I don't know if I'll get really to that point before the end of the show. But if you don't believe that happiness is within you because the mud is up to your eyeballs, you have a choice. You have options. Your choice is to be with the what is, okay? And that's your choice. But if your choice is to live something elevated from having mud up to your eyeballs, I'm not asking you right now to believe that happiness is within you. That may be a little bit of a stretch for you. What I'm asking you to believe is that you have a choice. That's all. The choice is not what is specific. The choice is just that you can make a choice. And once you realize that you can make a choice, then we begin to take a look at what it is we're going to choose and how we choose that and what that process is. We're going to take our break. It's our last break. Boy, we blew through this show today. We're going to take our last break, and I'll see you when we come back.
Looking to remodel your home? Contact Max Meza, owner of Precise Construction. Max is the contractor with a heart who will make sure the job is done right and you're happy with the end result. Need something repaired? Call Precise Construction at 559-477-3899 or email constructionprecise76@gmail.com. Lease or buy this modern 2-story Spanish-style building with private offices, open workspace, 2 restrooms, and a break room. This commercial office building is located at 10 East Olive in the Tower District. The floor plan is designed for easy conversion, and all interior walls are movable. Parking available at the back of the building in a fence-secure lot. Call Mike Briggs Properties at 559-486-6758 or visit MikeBriggsProperties.com. The Narrow Gauge Inn is your home away from home with 26 rooms offering majestic mountain views, private decks, and an atmosphere of true relaxation. Located just 4 miles from the south entrance to Yosemite National Park, the Narrow Gauge Inn is the perfect base for all your Yosemite adventures. Make your reservation now at narrowgaugeinn.com or call 559-683-7720.
This segment is brought to you by Mike Briggs Properties. The recession's over. It's now safe to sell your home. Call Mike Briggs Properties.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. So, we have a choice. And that's as far as we got. We know that we're not happy. We know that our life leaves a little bit to be desired, or a great bit. And we've come to a realization that we have choice. We can make a choice. What does that mean? Well, making a choice in and of itself is not going to instantaneously make a change. It's like making a choice to take that first step on a 1,000-mile journey. Until you make the choice to take the step, you'll never move from where you're at. So we decide to make a choice. We're going to start that journey. We're going to seek a path on this journey of understanding, a path of connecting with something higher than us, something that is the basis for all that is, something that, boy, we really would love to have that experience of it in our life and have that knowingness that comes from that experience, something that we're seeking out. So we make the choice. Now, oftentimes at this point, people get a little carried away with themselves. And excitement's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. But remember, this is a journey. It's not an instantaneous transition. Although, for some people it might be, but for most of us, it's a path, it's a journey. That journey's going to have some easy spots and it's going to have some tough spots. But if we make the choice and we commit to the choice we make, and we have the tools to commit, the rewards are awesome. So one of the things that we've got to realize as we make this choice is every journey needs a target. What's our target going to be? How do we define our target? That definition really has to come from within you. It's part of your experience. Now, when I say the word happiness or peace or experiencing divine love within you, those things are very specific to me and my understanding in my mind. They may not be exactly the same for you, but they may be just as important. Or you may have another word that you use or another point of view or another whatever. There is no wrong at this point. We've made a choice and now we're going to set a target. What do I mean by setting a target? We set a target so that we put the powers that are available to us at the level they're available to us into use, if you will. We'll get into this a little bit more in one of our next talks, but one of the things that we need to understand is we're going to create this. And we're going to create it in a very special place. A special place that is so awesome that we don't even believe that it is. But it is. That special place is our imagination. You know, we get on kids when they need to pay attention. They're daydreaming or whatever. What we need to do is encourage them to express their imagination. Now, maybe in a certain moment it might be inappropriate, but that's okay. When you're working with a child, you express to them, this is great. Maybe inappropriate at this point in time, but it really is great. Because the imagination, there's whole teachings that are enveloped and wrapped around the idea of the imagination and the power that it has and expresses in our life. But very basically, one of the things, without getting into real mystical, metaphysical understandings, one of the things that neuropsychology, psychologists, they've known for a long time that when we create something in our mind, in our imagination, when we create it very vividly, our subconscious, our subjective mind, it gets to a point where it cannot distinguish between that and what we call our reality. Now, that's kind of neat if you're thinking about, just kicking back and having a good experience. But think about if you happen to be a reader, if you read fiction or even nonfiction books, but books with stories, getting into that story and getting so into the book and so into the story that you realize at some point that you're experiencing it almost on some level as if you're there. That takes place within your imagination. But you know that you're reading and you know that it's a story and you know that it's there, and you don't put any power connectedness to it other than enjoying what it is that you're reading. But imagine, if you will, that you can create a story for yourself, wherein as you begin to really get into that story, that veil between being here or being in that story gets so thin that you can get lost in the story at some level. Now you say, well, that sounds kind of far out. I've never been able to do that. You may have, you may not have, but you can at some level. And that's something we all need to understand. That the imagination is not exclusive to artists or to writers or to musicians. It's a part of us. And when we begin to recognize it, if we happen to be someone that's not real imaginative, we may feel, like we're at a loss because we don't have this real vivid imagination. Don't let yourself worry about it, because you can change that. You can change that in ways that will begin to make your imagination vivid and active. But more importantly, you'll be changing your imagination to make it creative in your life. Not just creative in your mind, but creative in your life experience. As we do this, it's part of learning a skill, if you will, and I've talked about spirituality on some level as being skills that we learn. It's a skill set. Using our imagination is one of those skills, and if we're kind of not so much there, we can start once again right where we're at. But first, start by taking yourself into that place of peace, being at peace. You can call it a meditative state if you want. Call it a relaxed state. Again, referring back to another book of Ernest Holmes, this little book is called Love and Law. And in the back part of the book, there's a question and answer session. These are transcripts from lectures that Dr. Holmes gave a long time ago. And they have some questions from some of those lectures and his answers. And they talk about something called a mental equivalent. And I'm going to read you this. I'm going to give you a little bit out of the Science of Mind book on mental equivalent, and that's probably where we're going to wrap it up today. But the question is, how do we get a mental equivalent? In other words, how do we get that story in our imagination at the level that it is the equivalent of what it is we want to see in our life? And Dr. Holmes answered, by practice, meditation, thought, study, intelligence, concentration, inspiration, hope, faith, love, prayer, desire, and work. And he says there is no other way. There's no other way. That's part of our journey. That's part of our responsibility. When I talk about spiritual practices, those are the things that we're talking about. I opened up the show today talking about happiness, and we're going to continue on. Everybody has the ability to be happy. Most people don't believe it or know it. Doesn't change the fact that it's not true, because it is. So as we go through the next couple of shows, we're going to be talking about happiness, the process of creating happiness, the idea of mental equivalence. I've got just a couple minutes left, so I'm going to read you just the beginning of the chapter on mental equivalence out of what we call the textbook, The Science of Mind. Dr. Holmes says, if we know that the power with which we are dealing is principle and not personality, if we know and believe that mind, as in the mind of God, is the only actor, cause, effect, substance, intelligence, truth, and power that there is, if we have a real embodiment, then we can demonstrate. If we lack, if we are poor, if we are without friends, if we are without opportunity, we should be sure to erase from our consciousness any sense of lack. We erase thought from consciousness by pouring in an opposite thought. This thought meets with the other and neutralizes its effects. It rubs it out just as we rub the chalk off a chalkboard. If you're not familiar with that, if we rub or erase off a whiteboard, maybe that'll bring it up to date a bit. It rubs it out just as we rub this off the board. We must maintain a constant, positive, aggressive mental attitude in the truth. And as he speaks here of aggressive, we can call that determined or committed. As we do this, as we focus, this just gets really exciting. We're going to move into this in our next talk. We are the authors of our life experience, whether we realize it or not. New thought, religious science, science of mind and spirit are some of the tools that we can use to create that story. That's what I do, what I do. That's why I share what I share. I hope you can take what we have today and kind of let it rattle around in your mind a bit. See if it doesn't strike a chord with you. And as we move forward, we'll talk more about this creative process. I hope to see you when we come back. If you happen to be in Fresno, come on down to the Spiritual Awareness Center on Sunday. We're at 1470 North Van Ness in the Tower District. I will pre-prepare you should you show up. We don't do a Sunday church experience. What I do on Sunday is I teach. I teach science of mind. I teach it as a practicing philosophy that we can put into practice in our life. I want to see people take this. I want to see them use it. I want to see them change their life. Because I know as they do that, we change the world. So I thank you for being with me this week. I'll see you when we come back. As you go through the week, know that the light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you. Because wherever you are, God is there. And all is well. It really is. And it's happy, too. And I'll see you next week.
CentralValleyTalk.com